Amy's a community activist and leads government relations for the TO Foundation for Youth Involvement in Politics. You guys can applaud for each guest. The man, the myth, and the legend, Ken Greenberg, folks. Urban designer, teacher, writer, important Torontonian, beautiful human being, director of urban design and architecture for the City of Toronto, and principal at Greenberg Consultants, and really the leading authority on where this city has been, where it is now, and where it's leading. Ken Greenberg. Your bio is too long to read everything. You probably know the face of Ontario Place for All. That's Norm Pasquale. Norm is co-chair of Ontario Place for All. He led the No Jets TO fight at the Island Airport, and it says here you care deeply for our waterfront, but I think you wrote this, so I'm not sure.
I'm a little biased. I'm very biased towards the waterfront.
That's Norm, everybody. And the guy with the headphones over there, that's Bruce Van Dieten. 40 years in business, mostly self-employed, can never get hired anywhere. Bruce retired. He one of the great citizens, really, of our city, trading in a lot of that for civic engagement, which is so important. People in our neighborhoods deciding to all of the energy and ambition that one has on the other side of business life, or just life in general. Moving into the activist space is something to be heralded as well. Vice President of the Osceola Community Association, and proud member of the steering committee at Ontario Place for All, and CEO of the Green Party of Canada in Spadina, Fort York, Bruce Van Dieten. I guess I can go beside you, Bruce, if that's okay. There's a chair up in there. Yeah, sure. Okay. Cool. Maybe we should start to talk a little bit about when you guys were formed, and what's the driving motivation behind starting Ontario Place for All?
Sure, I'm happy to take that. Do you mind if I kick off with a quick land acknowledgement?
Sure.
I have deep respect for Indigenous peoples in Canada. We acknowledge that the West End of Phoenix is situated upon traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat peoples. We also acknowledge the land covered by Treaty 13 is held by the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and Toronto is subject to the District 1 Spoon Covenant. We also recognize the contributions and enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples in Ontario and the rest of Canada. To answer that question, we got together in January 2019 when the Ontario government just essentially said there was nothing there at Ontario Place. We can bulldoze this entire thing. And we were just shocked. Shocked. This is a place that has such special memories for people all across this province. So that was our kind of rally cry to start off our first rally. And it was really well attended. We had something like 250 people come out. So it just shows the depth of how much people care about Ontario Place and our waterfront. We were able to, we formed quickly at that time. We were able to, with the support of other groups, save the Sinisphere, the pods, and Trillium Park from destruction. So, that really was what was at stake here. And thank you. What was at stake is, a public waterfront. And, the thing about Ontario Place and what makes it great is when public interest, not commercial interest, drives the vision of Ontario Place. And, unfortunately, the Ford has just shown an inability to grasp this over the years. We've had mega malls, we've had monorails, we've had casinos, we've had jets at the Island Airport, and now we have a massive spot, Ontario Place. And this is why we all get together and speak every week to form the resistance and make sure that it stays an Ontario Place for all.
Ken, what about you? What's your history with that part of the city, and why did you feel motivated to get involved?
So it's a long history. It goes back over many decades. I worked with former Mayor David Crombie back in 2005 when he was actually representing the province of Ontario. And Joe Pantalone, city councillor, some of you may remember, was representing the city of Toronto as chair of the board of Exhibition Place. And the idea was a merger between the two sites to create a great 355-acre park, which would have had within it a sports stadium, conference facilities, a whole variety of things. But essentially, it was going to be a big public space. So that's just one of my major involvements. But I just want to start by saying, it's really unusual that we should be even having to have this conversation. The proposal for the West Island, the Therm Spa, is so wrong-headed in so many fundamental ways that, and I'm just going to enumerate a few of them, just to start off, Dave, if I may, that what we have to do is get people to see how abnormal this is, how offside it is, not focus on the details, not focus on cosmetic changes, just get rid of it. So in 1970-71, John Robarts, then Premier of Ontario, followed by Bill Davis, who took his place, gave Ontario Place to the world. It was a response to Expo 67. It was Ontario's answer to this wonderful explosion of design, of public space on the waterfront that had happened in Montreal. It was talked about. They hired two of the greatest designers in our midst, Eberhard Zeidler, the architect, and Michael Haupt, landscape architect, pioneer of landscape ecology. They came up with something extraordinary. The public loved it. Those of us who are older remember going there, kids, grandkids went all these years. Along comes Doug Ford, and as he attempted to do with the mouth of the Don River, back when Rob Ford became mayor of Toronto, you may remember they tried to get rid of the park that's under construction now. They were talking to an Australian developer about doing a mega mall, luxury yacht club, all of the other accoutrements that go with that. They were beaten back. So his government came, and as Norm said, they said, there's nothing there. We should start all over again. And their premise is we should privatize it. So they did an RFP, and they came up with 3 companies, none of which were from Toronto. An Austrian company, an American company, and a company from Montreal. And basically, they were in denial about the fact that this was a public space. For them, it was an opportunity to monetize real estate and bring in some kind of attraction. So, a few things. Ontario Place, not Budapest Place. This has zero to do with Ontario, which was the original impetus of the Progressive Conservative Party back in 1970. In terms of environment, it's hard to imagine something that would be more contrary to what we know about the environment in this time of climate change. I liken this to the ski hill, the indoor ski hill that's been built in Dubai. It's complete climate denial. And you know, for all the talk about being inspired by indigenous learning, if there's anything we've learned from indigenous teaching, it's some kind of faithfulness to the land. That's what's so crazy about it. The next thing is it's gigantic. The thing that they're proposing has a footprint the size of 7 football fields, a 13-story condominium. It occupies the entirety of the existing West Island, and the only public space they're proposing is by additional lake fill. It dwarfs Eberhard Zeidler's Great Pods and Sinosphere, makes them puny and insignificant. And the size of this, the sheer size of it as a barrier, as a blockage on the waterfront, which the designer of panel pointed out the other day, is incredible. And then finally, who is it for? It's designed like a vacuum cleaner. So the way it works is it hoovers people up at the entrance at Lakeshore Boulevard. They go inside this enormous machine and they never come out. And it basically turns its back to the waterfront on all sides with this impenetrable barrier. And the whole idea is people go inside, they spend their money, which is a lot. For a family of 4, it's $200 to spend a few hours there, and they never come out. So there's absolutely, even if you think this is an interesting idea, this is a good idea, it has nothing whatsoever to do with the waterfront, and it consciously denies its relationship to the waterfront. So I think what we have to do is get the public to understand in all these ways how completely wrong-headed this is. Not if I may say so, fight for little modifications or little tweaks to what is fundamentally and deeply flawed.
That's good.
100%.
How do we do it? How do we do it, and what's the timeline? It seems like the timeline is tight because things are underway. So
Yeah.
how do we do it?
And people don't know about it. That's the real problem.
It's true.
I
We are
ran
trying.
into 2 people today. I said, I'm going to this. And they're like, oh, I didn't know it was going to be a spa.
Right. So I'll start off, and Norm probably can answer that question in a way better than I can. But the next best hope is the design review panel of Waterfront Toronto, in polite terms, completely skewered the proposal.
Oh, good.
And their deliberations will become public. There will be, actually you can see online how the 3-hour session went and the summation by Paul Bedford, the chair.
This was Thursday night.
Yes,
Yeah.
but during the day.
During the day.
During the day. And this will all be, there'll be written minutes which will capture all this. The idea behind this was to give the city ammunition to, when the city planners write their report, which is coming soon on the application. And by the way, the application, Therm is hiding behind the government of Ontario.
Absolutely.
The application is coming from Infrastructure Ontario. They're the ones who are fronting.
They hire people from the government of Ontario.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I think the best hope is to get a strong report from the city planners with enough conditions in it that Therm can't meet. And if it's, what they have is a formula. If you look at everyone they've done in Eastern Europe, they've done them all. They're out in the ex-urban areas. They're surrounded by huge surface parking lots. It's like a McDonald's. It has a certain internal logic to it,
Right.
and they can't break it. So if we can get enough conditions coming out of the city, hopefully we can get them to walk away from this, because they won't be able to meet those conditions.
Yeah. I'll just also add, we need you. So please, all of you, go to OntarioPlaceForAll.com, subscribe, write a letter.
Yeah.
We need you to come out to City Hall. April 12th is going to be your first opportunity. So please, we need you. We need people power to win this fight too.
And we'll we'll get to questions in a second. I'll bring Bruce
I just
in here,
want to
but-
throw one quick rhetorical
Sorry, Bruce, one
question.
second. As that information becomes available, you can feed it through us, and Western Phoenix will have the information online for you as well.
Does anybody think an environmental assessment on the island would be a good idea?
Yeah, absolutely.
We all do.
Yeah.
There won't be one,
Yeah.
Why?
No.
because it's a private company. Even though it's public land, it's a private company.
They found the loophole.
Wow.
That's through Infrastructure
Is
Ontario.
TIF,
That's
is
how-
TIF still
that's how
supporting
that's
them?
We have written them a strongly worded letter.
Oh, really?
We are hoping they reconsider their position.
I'd like you to raise your hand if you have a question. If that's good, just so we're.
I have another question, sorry. Is there a way to compel the provincial government to disclose the terms of the lease? Because that's not public so far. It seems to me with the huge public investment in the underground parking garage, we've seen they're saying it's 400 million, who knows what it would actually cost. Is there a way of making them disclose what firms' obligations are if they don't meet their attendance figures, what they're paying, what they're responsible for?
They sure don't want to tell us anything.
They don't.
They want to tell the details of the lease, what this business deal is. We have no way to evaluate if this is a good deal or not. We do know we're paying $650 million of our money to make this happen, but we have no idea what we're getting from it. So
there's no way to, like, there's
We're
no,
trying.
Yeah.
Well, I guess maybe the question is how can people support that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I would say write a letter to the government. We have a letter writing apparatus right on our website, OntarioPlaceForAll.com. You can customize that letter, say, hey, we want to see the details of this business deal, please. Let us in. I mean, each one of us is giving you $60 to make this spa happen. Let us at least know what benefit there is, if any. That would be great.
Yeah. Question over here?
Yeah, I just, like, how do we counter what's going on with the major newspapers in terms of these full-page advertisements? I mean, because, you're preaching to the converted, which is, what, 40 of us? Meanwhile, all our national newspapers are giving these people full-page ads. making it sound like, it's Disneyland and it's gonna be free and cheap and fun and, which is.
But it always
There's business about, $200 for a family of 4. That's maybe in today's money. What's it gonna be when this place is actually built?
Julie, it always starts with the converted bill. It never starts
Yes.
with the unconverted, right? So at least it is a place to start. And I think, I don't want to disparage the fact that this is a room full of people who are interested in Ontario Place, in the future of Ontario Place. I think it actually is, and truthfully, we had dozens and dozens and dozens of more people who wanted to attend who couldn't. So I do think that the appetite is there, and I think we can all kind of take energy and marching orders from this potentially too.
But to your point, countering the message that
Yeah.
seems to be coming from media organizations with a lot more reach and a lot more followers, that's a good question. How do we counter that?
Yeah, as chair of No Jets TO, we were up against a $15 million campaign that was trying to get the Jets to happen at the Island Airport. And we won it with change that would jingle in your pocket and people power. So don't underestimate your power.
Before we get to the next question, Amy, I just wanted to ask you about why, there are a few young people here. You represent a different generation from those sitting.
Yeah.
Why are you involved? Why is this important to you?
Yeah, so I want to be here today to add a different perspective to this conversation. Frankly, young people today see Ontario Place as a place where we can connect with our peers and develop new hobbies, and it's an affordable place that we can finally be at. So once this spa is built using $650 million of our taxpayer money, and these costs could go up to over $200, how many youth here today do you think can afford to enter that facility? No one. Don't you think that this money should be better spent building more youth spaces around the city? Don't you think it should be spent creating a national food program for students to finally have access to nutritious foods in our schools? Don't you think it should be spent on greater mental health services for kids who come from low-income communities? And frankly, it's quite shameful that youth are going to be the ones that face the brunt of the climate crisis in the future. So I'm here today to talk about that. Thermia is going to cut down 850 mature trees. And they think that we can just rebuild these trees in a day or two. Absolutely not. Given that the fact that the city right now has a goal to reduce our emissions by net zero by 2040, how do we think that cutting down trees would do that, right? So that's my perspective here today. I want to bring in a youth angle and think about the people who will be using this in 10, 20, 30 years. Are we going to be able to afford it given rising inflationary costs, given the fact that youth are dealing with youth unemployment right now? And that's why I'm here. I want to talk about that. And I want to also shout out our TikTok, which you should all follow. Youth are also, creating blogs about this. We're holding our own rallies. We're trying to stay engaged. We're calling out the government on Instagram and as much as we can. And that's what we want to keep doing. Keep building that pressure.
Thanks, Sammy. Dave, there's one down front. This woman wanted to.
I just want to comment on just really quickly.
Yeah.
Maybe your Instagram and TikTok, you could add your link to the Waterfront for All letter page or something.
That would be great. Thank you so much. We appreciate that.
I just had a view to share in response to the question, how do we get the newspapers to? So they are receiving advertising revenue, absolutely, from these full page, full color advertisements. However, they are, in Canada, journalist institutions, and given the opinions and the strongly held views I'm hearing, write a letter to the editor and request, because there's about to be a report tabled, that the journalists provide equal space, equal time to the amount of advertising revenue they're receiving from Therm to what's going on in our city. That's what I think we do. The question was how? That to me is how. You write a letter to the editor.
Yeah. And tweeting out your opinions too, I know everybody in their aunt and uncle's doing it, but that also can have impact if you tag the editors and the writers and publications.
There's also one other area too that's important. We're trying as hard as we can to get in to talk to the various different counselors there. The Thermia Group has a number of different PR agencies that are actively involved on a day-by-day basis, calling counselors, selling their pitch. And we have counselors who won't even see us, which is ridiculous. But we're trying. We're working hard to get in there and get into those.
How important is it for you guys to make this a major issue among the candidates running for mayor of the city?
Huge. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely critical. Like, this has to be a defining issue. I mean, this is a decision that's going to be made this year at City Hall. Yeah. So they need to the mayoral candidates need to take this up and show a vision that they know what our waterfront's value is as a public resource for all of us. Like, this is one of those vision questions. Like, okay, we had a kind of a mayor that was managing things, but where was the vision? We need somebody with vision to recognize the value of Ontario Place and stand up for it.
Let's do one in the back. Christian in the back.
Can you write to any councillor, or does it have to be just the councillor for the ward that Ontario Place is in?
I would say write to your councillor.
Yeah.
Like number one, and then feel free to write to the rest. But speaking as a constituent, you have a lot of power.
Yeah, so even councillors that aren't directly involved in that area.
Yeah. They're voting. They're all going to vote.
And the candidates are going to be showing up at your door over the next 2 months too. So
And one challenge we have with that too is we feel, and maybe we get some response from you folks on this, but we feel we need to get more attention out in the, outside of Toronto and into Ontario, vis-a-vis Ontario Place. We need to get some response. If you've got family that lives outside of Toronto, we'd love it to get a bunch of letters from those people. So if you can keep that in mind, that would be great.
David at the back there, near the door.
Two other levels of government that are key players in this. First is the provincial government. There's more than just Doug Ford at Queen's Park. Mike Schreiner, the leader of the Ontario Green Party, has come out against Ontario Place. We have not heard from John Fraser, the leader of the Liberals. We have not heard from Mark Stiles, the new leader of the NDP government. All three of those party leaders should commit to canceling the contract for Ontario Place if elected. 3 years is not a long time to develop a game. We can delay this to the next election. Yeah. And if those three parties came out and opposed or promised to cancel the contract, Durham's financing would be in serious jeopardy. So, but we need to hear more from the NDP and the Liberals. Schreiner's done his bit, but that's the first step. Second step is the federal government also has a significant role to play in this. Currently, the 413 highway is hung up in a federal environmental impact assessment, an environmental impact assessment. So the federal government has intervened in Ontario and has delayed a major infrastructure project. Second, they announced last week that they are performing a review, like an impact assessment, of the Greenbelt Carve-Out and the Duffins Rouge Agricultural Preserve. So they're doing a study of Rouge National Park to see what impacts urbanization would have on that park. There's no reason. Ontario Place is a national landmark. We should expect the same thing from our federal government. We sent a lot of MPs from Toronto to Ottawa. It's time they worked for us, and that means we want a study of Ontario Place and any impacts on fisheries, the lake shore, climate change. There are a number of things where federal interests are impacted. If they impose a federal impact assessment or study or review, this could delay things 3 years, which would put this back into the next election.
Can I just pick up on that? Stephen Gilbo, who was leading that effort related to Rouge Park and the intervention of the federal government, is somebody who is perfectly capable of entering the fray here. And the whole premise of the Thermate plan is an enormous amount of lake fill. The federal government, in a variety of ways, will have something to say about that. It's not a foregone conclusion that will be easily accepted. That could bring the whole thing down. A bit of history, the Westway on the west side of Manhattan, a terrible highway project, was stopped by a U.S. federal government review that found that one species of fish would be damaged by this highway, and the whole project was canceled. So I think we should really work hard with Stephen Gilbo's office on the combination of cutting down all the mature trees and the lake fill expansion, and the emphasis on the automobile to the extent that it is being relied upon, are all, and the energy hog that this facility would be. All of these are factors that I think could be of interest to the federal government.
I absolutely agree. Could I just quickly add to that point? In December, Canada committed to making biodiversity targets and goals, and the cutting of these trees would mean that there won't be there'll be a loss of that biodiversity. That wildlife habitation will be immediately revoked and removed. So the federal government has made its promises and ambitions on an international scale, so they can make those promises for us Torontonians today. I believe that.
Go to the back there for the next question.
I have a question about, if you can speak to milestones. So someone mentioned April 12th as an important date. A while ago I had read that fall, like October, is a key date. City Hall making that decision, yea or nay. This is very, very high level. Would Ontario Place for All maybe speak to those important milestones where we could like physically be there, or
Sure.
if it's virtual, and after that, if you are you going to be posting that on your side so that we can track these milestones?
Yeah, so our website is a great place to stay up to date, and if you subscribe, we will be sending you emails, trust me, at every single opportunity to be able to affect this development.
And that website is what exactly?
OntarioPlaceForAll.com. Yes, it's mostly on the floor.
Oh, it's a floor.
Minus the dot org, yeah.
Number 4
so
Hall.
on April 12th, this will be at City Hall. It'll be our first opportunity to pack City Hall with people power. And then on April 15th, there will be a consultation over near the CNE, I think the Beanfield Center. And we'll have information for that stuff once it's completely firmed up on our website for everybody. But the whole timeline, we're looking at basically by December of this year, City Council will have looked at the application and will be voting yay or nay by December. So it's going to work through various sort of council meetings through this year.
City Council has the power to vote yea or nay on
The development application.
On
So there's a development application in right now at City Hall.
Okay.
And if you look at it, it consists of something like 80 documents. It's very complex. I've read through all 2,272 pages. It's quite a read. But it's currently at City Hall, and staff are working with the province. Ideally they would just say, hey guys, no spa. This is a terrible idea. So I hope that's where it lands.
We'll go for a question over here.
Yeah, just a comment.
Yeah.
Again, you were saying energy hub. I have in the climate emergencies, I've been ideas for the glass house, right?
Yes.
As far as air pollution.
On the lake.
The other thing is, what's the infrastructure? Because I assume you're going to be using a lot of water. Because there's already cases of effluent from other places in Ontario coming into the lake, fresh water source. So, my question is can they guarantee there's no effect on the Lake Ontario and fish and whatever, because then DFO would have to look into that, right, as a waterway.
Yep, that's a great point. I mean, they're infilling fish habitat. Like, they're actually going to put lake fill where the fish habitat currently is. So.
Wow.
Well, 2 things to add to that real quickly. There is there is a strip of land that separates Ontario Place and Exhibition Place. And to cross that land, to build on it, to build underneath it, the province needs to do a land swap with the City of Toronto. I don't know that we can really affect anything there, but that's an important area too, which we think we can hopefully use as leverage to maybe change the terms of the project. And again, if we could just push it down far enough, we'd be much better off. The other thing that this gentleman here who was speaking, you would think that the Navigable Waters Act would have something to do with it, with this place, but we're just not getting, we're getting stonewalled by levels of government here, so we're not getting the kind of response that I would have hoped we would get, but we'll keep trying.
So I just want to say, with John Tory's departure, something is different. John Tory was never going to challenge this scheme. However, there is a reasonable chance that Toronto can end up with a quote-unquote progressive mayor of some stripe. That the city could then write a planning report that would find enormous faults with the whole proposal. And if not go thumbs down on it completely, say that in order for this to be acceptable, it would have to profoundly change. We know that the provincial government, because this is provincial land, and even if it weren't, the provincial government has shown a propensity to step in with a ministerial order and override the city. But the politics of that, with a new mayor in place in Toronto, and if the city comes out against this, the politics of forcing the province to take that stand against the city would be really tricky for them. So I don't think, a lot of the talk in the city while John Tory was there is well, there's nothing we can do anyway, because the mayor is gonna be supportive of this. Things have changed. So I think there's a much better chance now of using whatever power the city has to take a stand, and then the ball is in their court. But I think there are a whole bunch of reasons to think that we can actually delay this, change it, make it impossible for them to proceed.
I'm wondering about the, it's like a Quebecois developer who was given some part of the land, I think they were called Eco-Recreo. I know that all of these processes have been shrouded in deep secrecy and mystery, but do we know anything about why they've actually pulled out and what that can tell us about the terms under which Terme might do the same thing?
Did everybody get that at the back?
We don't, the answer is we don't know, but I was told by a reporter from Le Devoir in Montreal that the speculation was, it was embarrassment that they felt about being involved in something that was so unpopular in Toronto. So that if that's true, that's interesting. There's also a significant rumor that if Therm goes ahead, the province will actually take a big chunk of the East Island and go back out and look for another private sector party to actually fill the void that was left by Eco-Recreo. So diminishing even further the amount of public space on the East Island. But they're being very quiet about that for now.
For now, is what was previously allotted for Eco-Recreo being considered part of the public realm design?
It is.
Okay.
It is, but you know, if you believe it's going to stay there, I got some swampland to sell you. Like, I'm skeptical it's going to stay public.
You mentioned, and obviously, which is great, there's so many ideas about how people can act and throw things at various levels. It sounds to me, to your earlier point about, to some degree, not focusing on the smaller details, but the bigger thing, that people have raised so many different angles to come at this, from the use of water after it's built, to fisheries, to trees coming down and things. Is there a platform for sort of an onslaught from like throwing all those different things? Because they say throw a lot at it, obviously they're only going to take a few things at once, but I'm just curious about sort of broadening that from the public.
Oh, did you have a comment on that?
Yes.
Please.
In regard to use of water, on a rower involves me. I use my boat to go to Ontario Place every morning with my heaven and my peace. There are a lot of other sports clubs who use that venue. There are for water sports, but we go all the way into the Ontario, right by the Smith Sphere. We turn around. It might be a good idea to involve the sports clubs with canoe and sailing club, Argonauts rowing club, and there are several other ones further down that relates to the waterway.
We're about 2 days ahead of you, because we have part of what I've been doing in my civic engagement with a gentleman by the name of Rick Amos is we've been actively involved in exhibition place, which is a whole other issue, folks, which we'll talk about another day.
And connected too.
And connected. But exhibition place, the CNEA, the Canadian National Exhibition Association, is a tenant of exhibition place. They're not owned by the city, they're not responsible to the city, they're a separate organization. And they need a lot of space, so if you've ever wondered why, I won't divert too much, but if you ever wondered why there was so much parking lot at Exhibition Place, it's for things like the Royal Winter Fair and the CNE. CNE is almost 150 years old, coming up to 145. It's a wonderful old institution. But it does present challenges for Exhibition Place, so we would have loved to work some deal out with Ontario Place that would have made this into a park a long time ago. We could actually a master plan that's been adopted that would have started that process along. Having said that, the CNEA has legacy rights to the channel, the West Channel. and with those legacy rates, and they're kind of grumpy with their landlord right now. So we don't know what's going to happen, but we're going to see if we can, you know, move them along to support us on it. Yes, we are definitely going to be talking. I put in a call on Friday to the Boulevard Club, and we're talking to the Argonaut Rowing Club.
If you're interested, I'm a member. If you want to have a bigger venue, I can arrange it for you.
Good.
To have it at the hall at the Argonaut.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
One of the legacy rights.
They have right away. They can use the waters. They've used it for all these years. They used to have skiing, you know, people making triangles.
Yeah, right. The water skiing. Yeah.
and of course the air show. So they have the C&D has rights to that. So the channel right now is planning, at least. So here's part of the problem too, folks. That everything keeps changing on this project. So every time we think we've found an angle we can work with, they change it a little bit to accommodate to some aspect of it, and then say, "Oh, don't worry about it. We've got you covered," which they don't. We're sitting here now in a situation where if we don't get these changes taken care of, if we don't find out what it is exactly that they're talking about, it's very hard to comment and do stuff. So they have a great situation where they can say, "Oh no, we're not going to cut down 850 trees. We're only going to cut down 400. That's just those crazy people that want to do that." Tell us what you're actually going to do. It changes all the time. So we feel that we're totally just in making any statement we want, because if you want to tell us that's not true, prove it. Prove it.
Just a quick show of hands, besides the people who actually have their hand in the air. How many people have been to Ontario Place in the last 4 months?
It's winter.
I know. Okay. Okay. Well, so I wonder whether, and Don, I'll get your question right after this, but I wonder whether, when the weather gets warmer, whether us and our groups and our friends and everything using that space as it exists now, whether that's an important part of the initiative moving forward.
Absolutely, and we continue to have walks. We actually had a walk yesterday, although the weather didn't cooperate. But we're going to do
But even
walks.
not in an organized capacity, whether that's a message that we can get sent to our friends.
Please use the space. Absolutely, it's a wonderful space. And places like Trillium Park show us what Ontario Place could be. You know?
Yeah.
We can easily dream of a better Ontario Place.
Don at the back.
Yeah, I wonder, does it make sense to focus our whole fight on not at Ontario Place, and so kind of be open to the idea that this mega spa would be fine in some industrial wasteland?
Yeah.
You know,
100%.
conservative types won't say, like, they're a bunch of hippies who don't like progress, or let's put the progress somewhere ugly. Like on the highway.
Well, in fact,
you're gonna drive there.
in fact,
the city get open, then it doesn't
Rexdale.
shut down the people in the suburbs or whoever. You know, like it could make jobs somewhere.
Yeah.
All those potential
well, in
positives.
fact, Chloe Marie Brown, who's running for mayor, had proposed that in the last mayoral race to put it in Rexdale, where she's from. Here's just a quick, interesting story. Chloe Marie Brown is a very, very smart lady. I like her a lot as a candidate, but that's a whole other issue. But she has a great proposal for what to do with Ontario Place, bringing it up to Rexdale, which is her stuff around. But what's really interesting is she's from the Caribbean. Her heritage is Caribbean. She sit down, take this in and try to believe that her and her friends did not realize that the lake was there. Now, when I say that, you say, well, of course, it's geographically, they've got to understand. But conceptually, they didn't know it was there. It wasn't a place that they went.
Yeah.
What is wrong with that picture when we have an Ontario Place and the people who live in Ontario, the people who could benefit the most, the people that for them is their cottage, how is it that they're not aware that this is there? This is the province's failure. This is our
For the developers moving the spa elsewhere, do you think that's appealing to them? Do you have any sense whether that would be?
I mean, some of their spokespeople have kind of fluffed off the idea, saying, "No, we won the RFP. This is our space. We're taking it." So. I mean, Nordstrom just closed. There's another opportunity.
Julia, just want to hold on. This woman hasn't asked a question, so.
Yeah, I appreciate all the points about this law, but I haven't heard anything about the East Island and the Live Nation part.
Yeah.
Could you just highlight any concerns that are also relevant about that part?
Well, it's another foreign company coming in to affect the heritage, the values of our local community. Frankly, we haven't been very thorough in the fight against Live Nation, but we don't agree that there should be another foreign company coming in to dictate our beautiful Ontario Place. It just seems that there's so much public opposition, yet no one is trying to listen, right? They want to build an underground parking lot that costs $450 million instead of maybe incentivizing people to walk to Ontario Place, instead of having better green public transit options and expanded walkways. It's just so perplexing that there's a Live Nation that's going to expand more space, and there's an underground parking lot that is something that we do not need or want. It just feels like no one is listening, right?
So then there's another angle there. Like the spa, the design for it is another gigantic shiny object. And they all kind of look the same, and they're all a slightly out-of-date architectural idea.
Yeah.
Now, environmentally makes no sense. And you have another one across Lakeshore Boulevard with the esports pavilion that is being proposed. And they all have in common that they create a big perimeter. They're going to enlarge the perimeter behind a paywall for Live Nation. So all of them are, think of gated communities. These are all like gigantic gated communities behind paywalls that take away public territory, and they all create these big baubles. It's funny how similar they all look. It's the same kind of jewelry. And they're all antithetical to current environmental concerns. So there's a theme going on here.
Yeah, from a technical perspective, there's not enough the amphitheater proposal's not yet got to a detailed stage yet, so we're focusing on which is currently the spot.
Yeah, you're saying. Yeah.
I know it's not city land, but just at the same time to say that I went to a meeting the other day at 519 about the city's master plan for the island, not to derail, but just while we're talking about Live Nation, we as queer people stood up and said, you cannot fuck the townlands, like this is,
hands off hands.
Really, hands off hands, exactly. And at least the city have said what actually is beneath and what's actually going on seems more complicated, but Live Nation was due to be involved in making a permanent event space on the field next to the beach, which is still Hanlon's Place.
And that was a secondary stage, I believe, too. It wasn't a main stage, it was a secondary stage.
Yeah, and because of overwhelming pushback against that from people in the queer community and allies, the city have backpedaled on that and said they won't. So I think the city is like open to opposition to somebody as big as Live Nation. It's more complicated than that, but it's good to know that the city might be open to similar conversations and that is happening.
Put this in perspective. This is part of a 5 or 6 decade struggle over the Toronto waterfront. Periodically, these proposals come along to take out big chunks of the waterfront, privatize them, commercialize them, take them out of public use, and we've had success through no jets, through no casino, through all of these different efforts over time to push these things back. They will keep coming forward. And this is just another one, but I think the fact that we have been more or less successful on all the big ones in the last 2 generations should give us some hope that we can do it again.
We're not going to keep you here forever because it's a beautiful day outside. So if you have, maybe we'll just kind of do a last round. If you have questions, just ask them now, and then we can sort of this in a vote.
I have 2 questions. If the plan hasn't been approved yet, why were the voters evicted from the voting?
We are so disappointed. I mean, they got practically no notice at all because they started work on the renovation of the Sinister and the pods, which I think that's good work, and I think they're also starting on site servicing. But they gave those voters no notice, and some of those folks live on that boat. Now they have to figure out where they're going to live for 6 months. People who are not well-to-do and actually live on that boat for 6 months now are homeless essentially. So it's a bad situation. They're given no notice, and now they're very much on our side and resisting this terrible plan, but just shows you how the province fails to plan. What was that? A couple days notice. Was that?
How did that happen? How did they bypass like approval from like the city?
Yeah, the minister just, commanded that the marina be closed and everybody get the booth. That was it.
Second quick question. Because I was quite young when Ontario Place, the part, a part, closed. I'm just wondering, why did it close? Because I remember going there as a kid, but I don't remember, it just kind of stopped, and I don't know why that happened.
So there's a long and sorry history. After its initial success, and people loved it, the governments of the day couldn't figure out what it was, and they hired one accounting firm after another, telling them, how do we have this valuable piece of real estate, how do we monetize it? And they lost sight of the vision of John Robarts and Bill Davis of this as a public space on the waterfront. They saw it as something they could just turn into a business and privatize. And that went on. I have a list of about a dozen of these studies. Meanwhile, they just neglected the site. They let it run down, and the idea was if we let it run down, then we can argue there's nothing there and it's easier to demolish it and start over again.
There are some other issues too, or some other reasons, and one of them, of course, was Canada's Wonderland.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, Ontario Place was ideal for kids up to about 10, 11, 12 years old. And then after that point, they wanted to go to Canada's Wonderland for the big rides and stuff like that. So that was one of the issues too. And then it was just not given the love that it needed to do it. It wasn't, again, it wasn't about the lake, it was about the attraction.
Yeah.
Julia?
Yeah, I just want to ask, where are our Indigenous leaders and the Indigenous community on this? And how can we?
We are striving to reach out to them, I mean, this development does not respect nature in any sort of way that I can recognize. So we are striving to reach out to them to.
It's disappointing the Mississaugas of the credit under Treaty 13 have ceded the land, but they never ceded the waterways. So they have an immediate impact that they could make to this project, but they become partners in the project, and I can't understand why. So.
Well, I don't think it's a secret that all the quote-unquote partners have been paid handsomely to do so, whether it's TIF or Mississauga.
Yeah, David makes a good point about the waterkeepers, who I think actually their name is now off the website. I think they're making moves to potentially try to square away from them. But TIF, I mean, there are people associated with, so there can also be, talk about tweets and letters and stuff, pressure on those groups as well. Because I think that will not be insignificant the more people pull away.
It seems like some partners don't even know they were listed as partners as well.
So that's TIF and Swim Big Fish to a point, but I think they're going to have, but keep an eye on who's associating themselves with the project as well.
Just to add to that, I do think it would be wonderful if we could mobilize some connection to Indigenous communities from this side of the conversation, because based on the review panel that happened and all of the rhetoric that Thurn is using about their Indigenous partners is, I think someone on the panel even said there needs to be accountability. You need to document what this means. When are you having these meetings and what does it mean? Because, they're working with knowledge keepers to talk about what plant life is going to go into the landscape, but have they talked to them about this building at all, or the water use, or access in any capacity? And I find that particularly disturbing, their use of that rhetoric they're making, and so I think it would be imperative to try and mobilize some voices holistically on the issue, not just on surveys terms.
Let's take two or three more last licks over there.
For me, I'm just thinking, okay, if we get to them to know, and then beyond that, what do we do? And I think I've read something about you were referring to Let's Look to Montreal, Archon Rapo, and how they, like, everybody has aligned there to a 10-year plan, 2020, 2030, to ensure that all elements align with the benefit of the public good. How do we get there? There's no answer right now, I know, but it's the hope.
Hope is important too, right? To believe that this can be done. I think belief is important as well. So.
Yeah, and to that, just real quickly, I mean, when we started this project off, when Ford announced it, who was the president at that time?
It was Jim Janu.
Jim Janu. Jim Janu said, there's nothing left here, we're just gonna level it all, including Trillium Park and the pods and Sinisphere, the very things that we've saved to this point. So our efforts are not completely without some fruit. I think we have a long way to go to say that we've had any kind of real impact, but again, with your help, things can change.
Yeah, I just want to switch the conversation slightly from what we're opposed to what we're for. Because I think the irony here is we have this organization called Waterfront Toronto, which is one of the best organizations of its kind in the world. What it is doing at the other side of downtown, in the Lower Don, creating this magnificent park system, reworking Rivermouth, doing everything from an environmental standpoint that we would hope should be done at this point, as a territory which on paper includes Ontario Place and Exhibition Place. It extends all the way over to Dowling Avenue. They were actually involved in creating Trillium Park. So they have already had a hand in Ontario Place. The politics are tricky because they're funded by the three levels of government, including the province, federal government, and the city. But it was their design review panel that made all these critical remarks about the plan. So here's a what if. What if you took the $650 million that is going to building a 5-story below grade, below water parking garage for 2,000 cars and the servicing for the spa, and you simply continued what Trillium Park was doing on the eastern edge of Ontario Place for about 2/3 of that amount of money. If you put it in the hands of Waterfront Toronto, you could do the entirety of Ontario Place to that quality, all the way over to including the West Island. In addition to which, another great proposal has arisen, which is a component of the Science Center coming down to the site to use the pods and TIF use the Sinisphere. In other words, take Therm out of the equation, which is contributing nothing to the rest of Ontario Place. Take the money that was being given to Therm as a subsidy and apply it to redoing Ontario Place and put it in the hands of Waterfront Toronto, which has delivered Sugar Beach, which is doing the Mouth of the Don, which did Corktown Common, which did all these great public spaces, and you have your answer. So it's not just a matter of saying, we don't like what they're doing. There is a much better idea, and it would cost less and be more effective.
Yeah, give the project to Waterfront Toronto. I mean, they know how to consult. They know how to build amazing waterfront properties. Love Park is opening this summer down in York and Queensquay. It's going to be spectacular. I mean, that's the way to do it, right?
And just there's all sorts of ideas. I mean, it could be a provincial park. Ken was involved in a project that looked at making the Ontario Place the eastern hub of the whole western reformation of the beaches, the western beaches. Which, by the way, as most of you probably know, because we live in the West End, is really the only kind of space available that can actually be expanded and be used more. Nobody's going to go out to Woodbine Beach all day. We'd love to go out to Woodbine Beach, but I mean, it's very busy, and it's in the East End. Center Island has its own issues. We're in the West End, and we've got this beach that has just been decimated by overtopping of the breakwall, and that breakwall's got to go anyway. So Ken's been involved in that. John Tory, for heaven's sake, had a project that was similar to what I'm talking about right now, what Ken had, that he presented in 2012, was it, Ken? Yeah. And so there are tons of other projects, just so you know.
And it is nice swimmable water at Ontario Place. It's one of the few places. Yeah.
One more question.
It's a good wrap up, maybe. For the councillors, what is your sense if the vote was to the one that's happening in December was to happen today? What would the results be?
We have work to do to educate council. So we want to be on the winning end of that, and we continue to advocate. And we need everybody to go talk to their local councillor, because they really, constituents have the power. So please reach out to your councillor. Tell them you want an Ontario Place film.
But before it gets to the councillors, the staff are doing all these hearings where they're going to hear from the public. If the planning staff hears from enough people saying the things that we're saying today, that will give them the confidence to be a little more forthcoming in their
So which planning staff are
April 15th is going to be your first opportunity. It's over at the Beanfield Center. Public consultation 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Save the date.
Let's thank Ontario Place for all.
I will say, by the way, Francesca's here from Ontario Place for All as well. So.
Excellent. Before y'all leave, I will say that we've reached out to Stacey before, and we've reached out to Therma as well for getting in here and Diamond Schmidt to talk about get a view from their side. Another opportunity for you to come out and fill this room and ask them questions the way you've asked this group. We plan to have as many candidates as possible in here for town hall events. You can find out about that by following our Instagram at West End Phoenix, and also our Twitter, and on our website is our newsletter that you can sign up for, and you can find out about what's going to be happening in this space. It's such a vital time. I mean, spring is going to be exceptional in this city, and it's maybe the most important mayoral race in our lifetime too. So let's all get together and be active and be good citizens and support our neighbors. Okay. So thank you very much.
Thanks, David.
Very good.
And thanks to West End people. Support our
No problem. Good.
Yeah, I wanted to throw in some random